He tied a stone to his chest and walked to the center of the river. After all, he tried everything he could to warn the king about what's coming. But the king didn't listen. The empire is in shambles, and you have no choice but to walk to your death. This tragic story created a holiday that 1 billion people still celebrate 2,300 years later. Let me tell you a story about the most dangerous thing in China, a man who tells the truth. Qu Yuan was born around 340 BC in the state of Chu. Chu was one of the great powers of the Warring States period, a kingdom in what is today central and southern China, a region of rivers and mist and deep forests. His family was royal blood, distantly related to the king. But what made him extraordinary wasn't his birth, it was his mind. He passed through the court as a young man and caught the attention of Chu Huai, King Huai of Chu. The king saw something in him. Qu Yuan could write, he could think, he could see what was coming before anyone else. In his 30s, Qu Yuan had risen to one of the highest posts in the kingdom, Zuo Tu, the minister of the left. He was an advisor to the throne, a diplomat, a strategist. Historians describe him as incorruptible. He spoke truth to power when everyone else was whispering flattery. Now, this was the Warring States period. 7 great kingdoms circled each other, waiting for one to stumble. And there was one kingdom that was growing faster than all the others. Qin, far to the west, the Qin state was consolidating power, training the most disciplined army anyone had ever seen, preparing to swallow all the others. Now, Qu Yuan saw this coming. He urged King Huai to form an alliance with the other kingdoms, Chu with Zhao, Chu with Wei, Chu with Han. Together, they could resist. They had to resist. If the Qin defeated them one kingdom at a time, they would eventually all fall. Separated, they were already doomed. The king listened for a moment, but Chu had enemies from within. At court, there were rivals, men who were jealous of Qu Yuan's influence, who whispered to the king that Qu Yuan was actually a fool, that the Qin threat was exaggerated, that there was money to be made in trading with the West rather than fighting them. And these men had something that Qu Yuan didn't have. They had patience, they had connections, and the kind of ruthlessness that moves slowly. They told the king lies about Qu Yuan. They said he was ambitious, that he wanted the throne for himself, that his warnings about Qin were a cover-up for a coup. The king, who had loved Qu Yuan, began to doubt. Around 330 BC, Qu Yuan was stripped of his titles and exiled from the capital. He was sent away from court, away from the king's ear, away from the power to influence anything. For more than a decade, Qu Yuan lived in exile. He wandered the territory of Chu, sometimes in the north, sometimes in the south, always an outsider, always watching the kingdom he loved make mistake after mistake. And during this exile, he did what he couldn't do at court. He wrote. The poems he created during these years are among the greatest works in Chinese literature. The most famous is called Li Sao, Encountering Sorrow. It's a poem of about 2,400 characters, one long lament that weaves together his personal heartbreak and the kingdom's descent into chaos. In the poem, Qu Yuan speaks directly to the gods. He's desperate, he is alone, he has been abandoned by the king he loved. The poem is a conversation with heaven itself. It's one of the first works of its kind in Chinese, a voice speaking directly to the cosmic order, asking not for mercy, but for understanding, for justice. Now, the poem wasn't widely read at first, but it survived. It was preserved. And over the centuries, it became the voice of loyalty in Chinese culture. Anyone who felt betrayed, anyone who had spoken the truth and been punished for it, anyone who had watched the world ignore their warnings, they found themselves in Qu Yuan's words. The poem also created something new in Chinese literature, the Saoti, the Sao style, a form of verse that combines personal emotion with cosmic reflection. Everything that came after Qu Yuan was measured against what he created. But While he was writing, the thing that he had warned about was happening. 279 BC, the Qin army marched on Chu. King Huai, the king who had exiled Qu Yuan, the king who had ignored his warnings, tried to negotiate. He traveled to Qin as a guest for peace talks. He never came home. He was imprisoned. He died in captivity. The capital of Chu, Yingcheng, fell to the Qin forces. The kingdom was conquered. When Qu Yuan heard that the capital had fallen, he stopped writing. He stopped eating. He walked south. He was living near the Xiang River in what is today's Hunan province. He walked to the banks of a tributary, the Mì Luó River. The water was moving, the current was strong, and there were no witnesses. Around 278 BC, Qu Yuan walked into the Mì Luó River. He left his robes on the bank. He walked into the water and did not come back. For days, there was no body. The people who loved him, the people who had read his poetry, who understood what he had tried to warn, they searched. They rowed boats up and down the river. They couldn't find him. They couldn't save him. And they couldn't let the river take him unclaimed. So they did something that has echoed through history. They made rice cakes, 粽子, and threw them into the water. The rice cakes were an offering. They said, take these instead. Don't eat his body. Let him rest. Honor him. And they raced boats along the river, searching for any sign of him, any chance to bring him home. They never found his body, but the ritual they created that day became a holiday, the 端午节, the Dragon Boat Festival. It falls on the 5th day of the 5th month in the lunar calendar. For 2,300 years, across China, across Vietnam, across Taiwan, across all the places that inherited Chinese tradition, people have raced boats and eaten rice cakes on this day. They do it because of what a man did in 278 BC. They do it to remember that once there was someone who loved his country more than his life, someone who told the truth when it would have been easier to lie, someone who refused to watch his kingdom fall in silence. The body of Qu Yuan was never found. Some say it was taken by the river. Some say it was carried so far downstream that it was never recovered. Now, in folklore, the dragon spirits of the river claimed him, took him into the water, not as punishment, but as honor. What we know is this: a man threw himself into a river to protest a betrayal. And instead of being forgotten, he became immortal. His name is written on boats. The Dragon Boat Festival exists because he refused to accept a kingdom's surrender. And if you read the Li Sao, even now, look for a link in the description below, this poem written 2,300 years ago, you will feel what he felt. The loneliness, the clarity, the love for something that was being destroyed, the refusal to look away. If you know someone who's ever told the truth when it would have been easier to stay quiet, share this video with them. They will love this story. Qu Yuan walked into a river and became immortal, not through survival, but through refusal. But there's another ancient Chinese story where devotion takes a form so strange, so layered, that 50,000 people have watched it, and most of them still aren't sure what they witnessed. Click on this thumbnail right now and watch it. Now that you've made it this far and you're still watching this video, here is the secret password: river. Start your comment with this word and I'll reply to you. And until next time, 再见!